Hello, good morning YouTube. Matthew Williams here, just talking to you today about the Bank of England, i.e. the privately owned bank, which of course isn't really privately owned according to the powers that be, as it was nationalised in the 40s or 50s. But as we all know, many things don't have the same ring to them when you actually start looking into the details. So I'm just going to read to you something here which is kind of interesting, because for a long time, for the last 100 years, people have been trying to find out who owns the Bank of England. Okay, because it was a privately owned institution in its entirety. And basically questions have been asked of, well, who owns this fucking bank? Because at the end of the day, it's loaning money to the United Kingdom, and it controls the interest rate, and it controls debt. So therefore, who actually owns this and runs it? And so a question was asked in Hansard. It was Hansard is the Houses of Parliament records for questions that have been asked. So it was on May the 6th of 1941, a gentleman called Mr. Stokes asked the Chancellor of the Exchequer whether he will introduce legislation to compel the Bank of England to prepare and print every 6 months a list of the shareholders and of its share capital, together with a supplementary list showing the beneficial owners thereof, and to make such lists available for the inspection by any member of the public free of charge at the bank's premises within ordinary business hours. To which the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. K. Wood, Sir K. Wood, replies, "No, sir." Pretty cocky cunt, isn't he, this guy? Mr. Stokes then says, "Is the Chancellor of the Exchequer aware that the shareholders of this institution are reputed to be largely foreign of origin, or are foreigners themselves? Is there any means by way the members of Parliament can ascertain the names of the shareholders of the bank?" To which Mr. K. Wood says, "I do not think there is any grounds for this statement, but if the honourable gentleman has any information, I will be glad if he will give me particulars. There are some 16,000 shareholders of this institution, and I doubt very much whether the honourable gentleman's statement is true of them." So basically, again, you give me information or no. Mr. Stokes then says, "Will the right honourable gentleman answer the last part of my question, whether there is any means by which the members of Parliament can ascertain the names of the shareholders of the Bank of England?" Sir K. Wood says, "I will inquire, and if I have anything to communicate, I will inform the honourable gentleman." And then Mr. Gallagher steps in, and, as another member of the House, I don't quite know his position, but he says, "Is it not the duty of the Chancellor of the Exchequer to give these particulars to the honourable member?" And Sir K. Wood, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, replies, "I have no doubt that the honourable member for Ipswich," meaning Mr. Stokes, "will be able to look after himself," i.e. keep out of it. Yes, keep out of it, keep your nose out of it, don't be standing up for somebody else. Yes. So Mr. Stokes says, "Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that the Chancellor of the Exchequer is not clear on this point, may I ask you whether or not there is any means by which the Member of Parliament can extract the information for which I have asked?" And the Speaker says, "I'm afraid I cannot answer that question." So basically, all of this is trying to get information out of the Bank of England and the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And the answer is, fuck off, basically. Nothing was ascertained from that. And even today now, people ask questions. This one was asked on Yahoo Answers, and basically somebody says, "I've been trying to find out something and it's very hard. The Bank of England states that it's a public sector institution wholly owned by the government but accountable to Parliament. However, the bank does have the ability to create money, and furthermore it does make a profit. So where does that profit go?" I checked the Bank of England. This is the person still making the point. I checked the Bank of England financial statements for 2008, which gives some clues. And it says the indication of the shareholders. The bank provides several services to its shareholder, HM Treasury, and to other departments and bodies. Profit for the year attributable to the shareholder, 161 million. The bank's holdings in any particular institution may change from time to time as part of realignments of holdings among the shareholders and participants. Indication, not all profits go back into public hands. Okay, that's the person's statement there. Then quoting from the bank again, the overall effect is the bank and HM Treasury will normally share banking departments post-tax profits equally. The Bank of England Act 1946, as amended by the Bank of England Act 1998, requires the bank to pay HM Treasury, just going dark outside, hang on, to pay HM Treasury in lieu of dividend of the bank capital. On the 5th of April and 5th of October, a sum of 25% of the banking department's post-tax profit, that's after tax, that means profit for financial year, on other sums as to the bank and HM Treasury may agree. And from what this person reads, only 25% of the Bank of England's profits go back into public hands. So what he's asking is, where do the rest of the profits from the printing of the money go? Which is 75% of the profits. The answer, which was best chosen by voters, is the details should be verifiable, but here goes. The Bank of England, like many big banks, is in fact a private corporation, evidenced by the fact that it's bankofengland.co.uk, not bankofengland.gov. Right? So, same with the Federal Reserve. If you will read the Bank of England Act of 1946, which ostensibly nationalised the bank, you will see that the share ownership still remained with whoever previously held shares in it previously. Now the government has a guarantee, so basically it guarantees the bank. Yes, the government makes board appointments, but the process is not transparent and is easily lobbied. Actually, I think the Crown actually makes the appointments and government approves them. So basically just rubber stamps it. The reason the bank is so closely tied to the government, and more explicitly HM Treasury, shows how tightly interwoven Parliament, the Crown and the Bank of England are. The Crown is the important bit there, because the Crown is basically the Bank of England with a few of its friends. This has historical reasons. The Bank of England is the oldest institution of its kind, and the Crown has had close relations to it and other corporations, i.e. the British East India Company, for many hundreds of years. Empire is an extension of corporate activity. The Federal Reserve Bank in the US is a private corporation as well. Since it is historically quite young, though, it is easier to verify its status vis-à-vis the government, and you can check the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, i.e. how it got made. So the Federal Reserve is owned by a number of large banks and private interests through shareholdings. Woodrow Wilson regretted his role in creating the Financial Reserve and its long-term consequences for the American people. In essence, the Federal Reserve and its precursor, the Bank of England, are privately owned, for-profit institutions. The missing 75% of your calculations are filling the establishment's pockets. Whose in particular? Well, that's harder to figure out, for the reasons we've already seen earlier on, because they won't tell you. And when you find out this, you should let me know, says the answerer. However, even the 25% going to HM Treasury are not necessarily going to revenue spent for public purposes. They are the, quote, cut the Crown gets directly for letting the Bank of England operate, a convenient operation arrangement. So much for the profits. How does the Bank of England create these profits, though? Mostly by the monopoly of lending money to the government and charging interest. That interest is paid back, amongst others, by the taxes that you and I pay. as you can see, you're not benefiting from the process, and it might be worth more while seeing how the 25% cut is spent. I'm not sure if you're aware that governments, specifically their treasury, can theoretically issue their own currency, and therefore wouldn't need to incur interest, as a consequence becoming the public debt. The process of creating money is the same for government as it is for banks, by fiat out of thin air. The innovation was that the Bank of England was to be made a monopoly lender to the government. I wonder who made it a monopoly, yeah? In order to process and set a bad example for other countries to follow. So all the other countries out there are following the same example. Basically, you create a fake bank owned by private holders and shareholders. Then you lend the money to the government, and the government pays you back interest. The interest comes from tax, and so that basically means that the private shareholders of the bank take tax money, which is supposed to go towards public projects, and pays most of this back privately to these shareholders, which means that no matter what we do in this country, every time a pound is created, 75% of the profit on paying back the debt on that pound goes directly back to shareholders. So it doesn't go back into paying for social infrastructure, the health service, for paying for the police or the military. It goes back to private shareholders. So who do you think the richest people in the British money system are? It's not us for privately owning the bank, or for publicly owning the bank rather. It's I get that mixed up. It's a publicly owned organisation, but the profits go to private concerns. So anyway, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Now I've got a document here which appeared on davidicke.com, and it shows that the major shareholders of the Bank of England and Federal Reserve are actually private individuals and private banks. So the Bank of England is mostly Nathan Meyer Rothschild, NM Rothschild. Then you have subsidiaries, J. Henry Schroeder Banking Corporation, Brown, Shipley, Morgan and Grenfell, Lazard and Company Brothers, Alex Brown and Brown Brothers, Lord Montagu, Morgan, Etsy, Lazard and Son, Harriman Brothers, the Paris Brothers, the governor of the bank himself, J.P. Morgan and Co., N.Y. Morgan Ferrez, that was from 1924 to 1938, Guattari Company of Paris, Morgan Stanley Company, Schroeder Bank, Hamburg office, Berlin Drexel and Company of Philadelphia, Lord Arley, M.N. Warburg, Henry Schroeder of Hamburg, and he's basically married to Virginia F. Ryan, the granddaughter of Otto Kahn of Kuhn and Loeb Company, Lehman Brothers of New York. So basically, the list goes on. But I mean, I'm sure a number of these names will be quite familiar to you as being the banker mafia cartel of the world. So these are some of the people who were owning the bank. Do you think much of that will have changed? Basically, if what the banker was saying in his 1,600 shareholders, what you basically got is 1,600 mafia people who expect their government fucking payout for doing absolutely nothing and providing no real input into the British system other than to create fake money in order to have their fucking free payout. Yeah. So basically, when somebody says to you that they're unemployed when they're on the dole and they're not working and they're getting fucking paid for doing fuck all, that's all the bankers do. That is all the bankers do. So just an interesting little perspective on how the system actually works. And if anybody does have access to who the shareholders really are out there, because this is protected by law. It's the only company in the United Kingdom that is allowed to not reveal its shareholders' names. It's the only company in the UK, the Bank of England, that doesn't, by law, have to reveal its shareholders' names. I wonder why that is. Is that because people would go fucking mental apeshit if they knew who the fucking shareholders were? I think they fucking would. So there you go. See if you can find it, and it would be quite interesting if you can provide that information online. So, thanks very much for watching, and also have a look at some of these videos below, because they seem to highlight pretty fucking clearly how the bank was set up in the first place. There's two very interesting videos. There's one called the Rothschilds, big clue there on what you're going to see in the video, and there's another one by Eustace Mullins, who printed a book called Secrets of the Federal Reserve, which I well recommend you reading. But this video pretty much sums up what you're going to read in the book. So have a look at these videos, see what you think, and see if you sort of now start to understand that this interwells into the Zionist conspiracy that does exist. And that's not a Jewish conspiracy, by the way. This is a Zionist conspiracy, which is a small number of Jewish people, not all Jews, but a small number of Jewish people and world leaders and very powerful people who have set themselves up in order to sustain the false state of Israel and also to control the world's banks, which is basically not contested by many people. So go and have a look at this Zionist agenda, which America 100% supports. So go and have a look up the word Zionist and see what you can find.